Three, two, one. Good morning. What is going on, guys? We are back at it again. We are Man Stuff Outdoors, and this is the Dead Silence Podcast, episode number 3. So, the past couple weeks, we've been talking about our hunts and essentially the highlights from them. But we haven't had a decent kill or haven't had any trophies, I should say. But what we have been doing is we have been filling the freezer, and we have been kind of managing what we like to refer to as herd management. It's hard to since we have neighbors who kind of are not on the same page as us. It's kind of hard to get proper herd management and grow monster bucks because a lot of hunters kind of are not educated on how to grow a herd, and sometimes they'll kill a what I'll refer to as an off-peak buck. Is that a good way to refer to it, Chris?
That's the kindest way I've ever heard anybody put that.
Here's the issue that I have, guys. A lot of hunters out there, in a lot of states and a lot of counties, they don't have a lot of doe days. So I understand the idea around having to kill a smaller buck because it might be the only opportunity that you have to get a deer. And in those cases, I completely understand. But the county that we hunt at in Virginia, if you're hunting on private land, I believe it's a doe day you can harvest a doe every day of the season.
It is.
So essentially my argument for at least my county and the people in my county is that we need to stop killing 4-point scrub bucks and let these young bucks mature out, get 5 and 6 years old, and then harvest them. It's if we want to get southwestern Virginia in line with the rest of the country, we kind of have to educate our community, and the reason being is because we have the potential to have big bucks. There's been lots of big bucks killed in southwestern Virginia, not like Minnesota type bucks, but definitely 140, 150 class monsters, and I mean there's some bigger than that, but we have the potential to grow a lot of 140 class bucks.
You said it applies just to our county, but I really think that it applies bigger than that.
I mean,
because
right.
if you look at it ethically, right? The ethical way to harvest an animal is to harvest one. The animal that you take needs to be mature. It needs to have fulfilled whatever ideal purpose is that it's supposed to fulfill, So by 5-6 years old, it's contributed back to the herd. It's mature. You need to harvest an animal that's big enough or old enough.
I'm about to be a giant hypocrite though.
Okay.
If that's the case, because as far as the doe management side of things, I've done quite a bit of research here the past couple years. Just essentially we freed up most of the pressure on our hunting 4 or 5 years ago, and ever since then we've seen some decent results. We've had your bigger than average buck coming in, but I feel like that is also because we thin the herd out a lot. So when we're killing these does, we don't necessarily always kill the oldest and biggest doe. We like to keep some of those older does in the herd, and sometimes we'll take younger does, and the reason being is because you don't want to kill out all the old does, and that will make so little, or that will kind of destroy the competition hierarchy, and then you have a lot of smaller does having small babies. And these big older does, they have really big healthy babies, and if a big mature buck can breed with a big healthy doe, the results can be very, very obvious, because you start seeing deer with bigger horns, bigger frames, and bigger bodies in general. So occasionally you need to, and from the way what our strategy has been is essentially we take a few does from each age group. We kind of look at our herd, and our deer kind of tend to clump around in groups of 4 to 5 and just kind of stick with each other throughout the year. So we'll look at each herd or each group and see kind of what the dynamics of the group are, and kind of just do a overview of the whole farm in general, and kind of use our gut when it comes to trying to figure out the best doe to harvest at that given time.
It's probably also important. Sorry, I interrupted you, Brett. I saw you leaning towards the mic. Go ahead.
Very good. So I just have a question here. So if you have this population of deer that's overrunning the land, what's the fastest way to manage that population, or decrease the population?
More meat in the freezer.
The fastest way?
Is it to kill the bucks? Is it to kill
No.
the doe?
Does. It's to kill does. I read a statistic, and it's been a couple of 3 years ago now, but I read a statistic that typically deer populations produce 2 does to every 1 buck. So if you want to decrease the herd and decrease the amount of breeding potential that the buck has, you got to kill some does. I don't know what the fastest way, and that's an interesting question. Maybe you're right.
So,
maybe it is.
Yeah, so maybe politically, they should, if they want to manage or control the population, they could open up more doe tags or make it cheaper for a license or something. So it'd be a strategy for control.
Yeah, and they kind of do that in Grayson County, because, like I said, on private land we have doe days every single day, but that's because we have a lot of does in our county.
Well, it's the other thing we got to mention here is that none of us are experts on this.
Oh yeah, disclaimer: we are not scientists. All we can use is our empirical evidence from hunting for me 20 years, Chris 20 years, and Brett now 4 or 5. He's the newbie, and me and Chris have hunted for 20 years, and we're still relatively novice when it comes to, if you look at hunting as a big spectrum. I would say that we're still on the novice side of things as far as that goes, and the important thing is that we're trying to educate ourselves. Excuse me. We're trying to educate ourselves. We're trying to research some of this stuff and make informed decisions about the animals we take, how we take them, what times a year we take them, how we process them, and essentially the entire process is as scientific as we can make it. We're not scientists. Well, Brett is a scientist, but me and Chris are not. So we just we kind of wing it, and so far though the results are showing. Like we've had some good deer the past few years. There hasn't been a bunch of big bucks, but there has always been 1 or 2 pretty big bucks that are around. And before, I don't know if that was necessarily true 10 years ago.
I just realized that I contradicted myself. I said take a mature animal, a really mature animal, and we were talking about 5 and 6 year old bucks.
Yeah.
And this year, I think I killed a 3.5, 4 year old deer.
Yeah. Yeah.
So take what I say with a grain of salt. I'm not an expert here.
The goal is to go out and take a 4 and 5 year old animal, but
right.
Sometimes when we're in the moment, we need the meat, something's going on. That buck you got was a nice buck. Um, Pretty much by anybody's standards, a decent little buck. Um, and it had been a few years since you'd killed a buck, so you were due to get one. You know, he would have been a monster next year, but that's besides there's probably no way he would have made it through the year, because he
Right.
definitely was a shooter buck, and anyone in our area who saw that deer would have probably taken. So
Yeah. Well, it- yeah. We'll just leave it at that. That's a good way to end that.
so uh, this is kind of something that we didn't address, but me and Brett are on location in my room. Um, we're in the podcast studio. You guys, for you guys that are watching on YouTube, hopefully, hopefully this double camera is not screwing with you guys too bad. But what we were talking about kind of before the podcast was essentially cooking wild game, and me and Brett had a pretty good meal last night. I want to drag a picture of our.
Oh boy, it was good.
Oh yeah, it was. So I'm gonna drag this picture over. So
I had
this-
pork chops. Does that count?
Yeah, that does count.
Yeah.
So we had this right here. This right here is bacon, jalapeno onion with a little bit of deer strip and some cheese, some mozzarella cheese in the middle, and we wrapped it up in the bacon, put a toothpick through it, threw it in the oven. It came out the bacon. The bacon did not come out crispy and well, as crispy as I like, but it still came out absolutely phenomenal. And to couple with this, let me show you guys one more picture. To couple with it, we had some venison backstraps.
Mm.
A nice medium rare. They were.
Let me
See,
pull
now
up-
I'm hungry.
Let me pull up a picture for you guys.
I'm
real quick.
getting hungry. I'm ready to eat some breakfast.
So essentially, this was the meal: potatoes, deer kebabs, and backstraps. So it was absolutely phenomenal. Every time that I take the time and invest in a new recipe, that was the first time I'd made those jalapeno popper things, and they turned out good. I'm gonna perfect them more in the future, and hopefully keep improving on it. But essentially, I just want to share how amazing this food is that we get, and you can't buy it in a restaurant.
Tell them
You just can't.
what we had the other day.
What did we have the other day?
What you and I ate. It was cooked in a crock pot.
Oh yeah, so I had a couple squirrels in the refrigerator, or in the freezer, and just threw them in the crock pot. Essentially, I just threw them in the crock pot with a little bit of oil, cooked them for 24 hours on low, and peeled the meat off the bone after the 24 hours, and we made squirrel tacos.
I've never heard of a squirrel taco.
It's essentially like any other taco with squirrel meat.
I think they get the idea. It's not hard to imagine a squirrel. No, I mean, it's,
But yeah, it was, and I think I've got to start investing more time into getting some more squirrels, because squirrels are awesome. I mean, I don't know the best way to describe them, but I would almost describe them as eating chicken wings.
Yeah.
In a way. That's kind of the meat
Mhm.
type that I get from them, and it's absolutely amazing when you cook it the right way. And I thought my tacos weren't exactly perfect. I got to tweak my recipe just a little bit, and that's essentially what it comes down to, guys. Is trial and error in order to find out, because I've met a lot of people throughout my life that don't know how to cook venison, and that is venison, wild game, whatever. And that is, you have to know just as much about cooking it as you do hunting it, in my opinion, because if you don't know how to cook it correctly, you probably don't have any business hunting it because you're not going to like the taste. And that's what we're after. Is we're after meat for the table, and figuring out how to prepare it properly is super important. And it's not really something that I got into until recently. I don't know if I mentioned this last week, but we ended up making 25 pounds of jalapeno summer sausage. Got a smoker, got one of those LEM sausage stuffers, and essentially made 25 pounds of summer sausage. And again, it didn't turn out perfect, but it turned out pretty daggone good. I burned a little bit of it just because of my lack of skill when it comes to the smoker, but that will improve, and I'll figure it out. But just being able to come up with new things and new ideas as far as what we're putting in our bodies, and it's, like we've said before, it's some of the most protein-rich meat that you can eat, and some of the leanest and healthiest that is available pretty much anywhere.
Well, sorry, go ahead, Brett.
No, you go.
One of the more important things that I've learned when it comes to cooking any kind of deer meat, really any kind of wild game, is preparation. If you don't clean the meat the right way, or if you don't butcher it the right way, you're going to have a bad time eating this. Yeah. So inside of the hams on a deer and the hindquarters on a deer, there are glands that you have to get out. Otherwise, it'll ruin the roast.
Yeah. And the gland, essentially, it's hard to miss. It looks like a big ball of fat right in the middle of the meat. You definitely want to make sure you get that. I think it's is it in the left ham?
No, there's actually one in each ham.
That's why that right ham.
Maybe that's why that right hand tasted a little gamey.
So let me ask this: how much of an investment is it to get the equipment to be able to do this stuff, like packaging, smoking?
Okay, so I'm just gonna
deer jerky.
The best thing that I can tell you is what I have, and it's essentially you could definitely do it with less, but you need a good hamburger grinder. That is fairly important to this process, and with a good if you get a hamburger grinder, you can do most of this stuff because you can put different attachments onto the hamburger grinder, and that'll pretty much do the job for you. But essentially, you need a clean knife, a hamburger grinder, and some freezer bags, and maybe I definitely recommend a food storage system, a air vac sealer. I started vacuum sealing our meat a few years ago, and the quality has just improved tenfold. On the, I started taking more time in the butchering process. So before I would just kind of cut it into big chunks and then figure it out later. But now I really take my time during the venison or during the butchering process and get all that silver skin off, get all that fat off, essentially. Make the meat as good as I can make it right after I take it off the animal.
I wouldn't leave vacuum packing as an option. That's you got to have a vacuum packer.
Yeah, well, you can wrap it really tight in saran and then get some of that that game meat paper.
Yeah.
And wrap it in that, and I've heard good things about that. I've heard lots of experienced hunters and lots of experienced, game chefs do it that way. But I feel like vacuum packing is just so much easier. Just get a good one. I know a lot of people don't use them because 5 or 6 years ago, vacuum sealers were not that good. But now they make some really good ones. And it's definitely worth the investment if you're any kind of outdoorsman at all, essentially.
I think Food Saver makes one. I think the one that I have, it's actually my dad's, but same thing. Food Saver makes one that's specifically made for game. So I mean, I forget which edition it is, Silver Edition or something, one of those words. But yeah, they make one specifically for wild game.
Nice. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think I think I have the same one because like on
Yeah,
the
you do have them.
yeah, is it a Food Saver?
Yep, that's
what I thought.
I sold it.
I think
Almost bought it.
and Brett was telling me that that he introduced a couple coworkers of his to some venison. Had they ever had it before?
One of them had. He's grew up hunting and his family hunts, and he was all excited. But his girlfriend, who works with me, she had never eaten deer, specifically deer tenderloin. So I brought some tenderloins over for him. I marinated a little bit, some soy sauce, Worcestershire, salt and pepper.
Worcestershire.
Salt and peppered the heck out of them. Grilled them up, and good medium rare. They were really good.
What did they think?
They only want to eat deer meat now.
From now on, it's like that's all they want. It's good though that we can take this opportunity to introduce people to venison or whatever kind of game meat, and I haven't had any kind of complaints so far. So I'm gonna keep feeding people deer meat and making believers out of them. Because a lot of people, there's a lot of ideas that go around about how to cook game meat, and some people like to cook it super well done, but I cook mine just like beef, good medium rare, and it's probably one of the most delicious things I've ever eaten.
The and hopefully as a decent segue, the bacon that you were talking about.
Yeah.
And you were talking about it coming out kind of undercooked. Have you ever had any problems with undercooked pork?
I have not had any problems with undercooked pork. Have you?
Mm-mm.
I haven't either.
No.
But I do have a good story about essentially the thing in the United States back in the day. I don't have a good year frame, but I know this happened. Essentially, you used to be able to contract trichinosis from pork, and what trichinosis is it's worms essentially. You eat undercooked meat, and the worms they get in your system, and they put larvae in your muscle tissues, and essentially once you get trichinosis, you're never getting rid of it. So you've got to be really careful about this stuff because it stays with you. But essentially, what the way that the practice used to happen was all the restaurants used to sell their leftovers essentially to farmers for slop for pigs, and you had all these pigs getting trichinosis, and nobody could figure out exactly how they were getting it, and what it ended up being is rats and varmints and things would end up getting in this slop essentially and feeding on the slop, and the pigs would feed on the rats and the mice and the varmints and whatever. That is what was actually giving the pigs trichinosis. So essentially, you never hear about getting trichinosis from pork anymore. I think it's like 95% of all trichinosis cases come from bear meat, black bear meat. So you want to make sure that animals that have the potential to give you trichinosis, such as black bear, mountain lion. I've never ate mountain lion, but I know it can give you trichinosis. You want to make sure that you get that stuff cooked very well done. I think that it's 165 is the internal temperature that you have to go for to nip that stuff in the bud.
So if it's 165, take it to 170.
Yeah.
Yeah, 'cause, well, I think it's if you get it to 165, you're going to be good, because that's well done essentially. If you get an internal temperature of 165, that is about as done as you can get something. So, but yeah, just the fun fact out there. Um, what have you got on the board, Chris? What have we missed? Oh, I got it. So essentially, we were talking about herd
All right.
management a little bit ago, and I just kind of wanted to give you guys a breakdown. I had Marcus. You guys have seen him in some of my other videos, and we went out and did a little herd management. We've harvested. Let's see. We've harvested 4 does, and processed them, and that's where I got that 25 pounds of summer sausage. But killed a couple smaller does, and then killed one big doe, and then have killed a couple medium does this year. Brett got a medium-sized doe. I killed a medium-sized doe, and so essentially the harvest report is that there are still a lot of deer out there, and still herd management duties to be done, and we're not done this year. Trying to thin them out, and another thing you want to do is kind of see how many your neighbors are harvesting, because you don't want to go out there and harvest a bunch of deer if your neighbors are harvesting a bunch. So essentially, you have to gauge it on how large the doe population is during the season.
Now, what size plot of land are you managing here?
So essentially, we have about 200 and some acres that we have kind of are able to manage a little bit, but the surrounding 2,000 acres is like the Wild West, and you really don't have anybody trying to manage anything, and it can get really frustrating.
I think that's getting a little better, Richard. I think there's more land there than you think.
Yeah.
I think there's more than 200 acres. I think you're somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 to 4, based on what, just maybe not that are like part of the same plot of land,
Mm-hmm.
but of people that are trying to manage this area.
Yeah.
I'm
with it.
All right, so those of you that are listening aren't going to know what I'm talking about here, but just on the top of the ridge, you've got the landmass is spread out so that we're not covering the entire top of this ridge, but most of it. So the deer kind of have to cross us to get to just about anybody else.
Yeah.
And I think that of the people that I know that are hunting next to us legally, let me preface it by saying legally, they're doing a pretty good job of managing the deer.
We have completely different viewpoints on this. It's definitely better than it used to be, but
That's what I'm saying.
a lot of
Based
that,
on what
a
it
lot
used
of
to be
that
10
is
years
just
ago.
running the road. During hunting season, we have to run the roads to make sure people aren't road hunting on us.
Yeah.
It used to be a big problem. People would come by and road hunt, and it's like, what are you guys doing? It baffles my mind. It's like going into somebody else's house, opening up their fridge, grabbing a steak out of their fridge, and saying, "See ya." It's really confusing. That whole entire mindset is confusing to me. That whole.
What?
Well, why do you think it happened? Is it because licenses are expensive, hard to get?
No.
No,
I think it's laziness.
It's just a way of life, really.
I swear, I think it's laziness. I think it boils down to just an unwillingness to put in the work to actually harvest a deer the right way.
Yeah.
I swear, I think it's just laziness. And the guys that are riding around in a truck trying to shoot them from the road, it's just because they're not man enough to sit in a stand.
Yeah, I mean,
That's it.
there's a lot of that, and I also think that there's a lot of cultural things involved with this. I think that a lot of people that do that, they grew up doing that. They were kind of raised in a poaching environment, and they've just continued it on, and they're kind of outlaws, and I mean they're not bad people, but they're wrong when it comes to this specific thing, this specific idea of going around poaching off other people's property.
They're not bad people, but they are lazy. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm not going to make it sound nice. I'm not going to reach out and touch them on the arm. I'm telling you that I've got a real problem with people that want to go kill a big buck or want to shoot a deer and then post pictures of it on social media and say, hey, I killed this. And then I see the vehicle in the background and I'm thinking, I know who you are. I know where you hunt. I know what you do. You shot it from the road.
Yeah.
I've got a real problem with that because here I sit in a tree when it's 22 degrees outside and the wind is blowing so hard it's trying to knock me out of the tree, trying to kill an ethically kill. Let me say that again. And ethically take an animal, and they're running up and down the road shooting them from the road.
Yeah.
I got some serious heartburn with that.
I mean, it's seriously frustrating, and I've been. I remember a few years ago, mine and Chris's dads they were riding around, and there's a guy walking out of our property with a head. He went and apparently had shot a deer and went in there and cut its head off. And if you're going to do that, that's one thing. If you're going to do that, go onto somebody else's property and just cut the head off the deer. That is a completely different story. That is the lowest of the low, in my opinion. I have no respect for anybody that would do that, and it makes no sense.
I think they call it want and waste.
Yeah.
So if you kill an animal just for the trophy, just to have the antlers, you don't need to be hunting. You don't need to have anything to do with the sport if that's what you're going to do.
Those are the individuals that give hunting a bad name and give the anti-hunting coalition ammunition against us, essentially.
Yeah.
Because of and it's not. This is not the majority of hunters. This is
No.
a small subsection of individuals out there who just kind of live life on the line, and I understand that, but sometimes you gotta reassess the situation and kind of realize what the right thing is to do and actually follow through with the right thing. But I guess that's why we have laws, is because not everybody does the right thing. It's sad because in Virginia, after rifle season, they shut it down for 2 weeks. Essentially, they bring back bow season for a couple weeks, and they try to kind of give the deer a little bit of a break right after rifle season. And 2 days after rifle season, I was hunting with my bow, and Dad was kind of patrolling around looking for road hunters, essentially, and comes across this 8-point buck in the ditch, in the road, shot between the shoulders. So somebody was out there hunting with a rifle, out of season, shot this good 8-point deer. He said it wasn't a monster by any means, but definitely if it would have, it made it through rifle season, so it very well could have made it till the rest of the year, and then next year come back a absolute monster. But that's the kind of stuff we have to deal with. That's one of the most disgusting things that I can think of around hunting is that the animal that had so much potential and could have passed on so much of its genetic makeup, and it was cut short, essentially.
Here's another important thing. We talked about taking an animal that's mature, and we talked about the importance of waiting on a deer that's of the right age, of the right size, and all of these things. You may not kill a deer for a couple of seasons waiting on this deer. I have personally, just me, have waited 4, 5 seasons waiting on a deer that was harvestable. Now, have I taken does on doe day or things like that? Yeah, I have.
As
Have
you
I
said,
shot?
Which is
Have
the
I?
reason, the reason for doe days, and this is to population control, and that is 100% ethical.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with it.
But you may not kill a buck. You may not kill. If you see a spike come by you, let it walk.
Not every hunt is going to be the hunt of a lifetime.
And not every season you're going to harvest a buck.
Exactly.
That's the way that works. You've got the rest of your life to hunt.
This season.
Yeah. Well, I mean, really though, let's be honest about it, because
I've never.
I hunted. See, Brett has never harvested a buck.
Yeah, but Brett is, he could have killed him. I mean, you saw a couple spikes, you saw a couple four-pointers. He could have gone out there and done it. Like, he could have got out there, got his T-shirt, and been done with it. But because we are introducing him to this, he has, I feel like, a good chance of essentially doing things ethically. So the decision, the training, I think that I've tried to implement. When I try to teach people to hunt, I try to teach them these basic values that most hunters believe. And essentially, if you just abide by just some basic rules, I mean, I feel like it's one of the most enriching things that you can possibly do in your life.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I do. I think you're right. It's a pet peeve of mine to see people. And now, okay, to certain people, those that don't get to hunt, that aren't afforded the opportunity to hunt, that have to work all the time, or, they're trying to provide for their families and they really just want to go and try to harvest an animal. A 4-point buck is a trophy.
Yeah. And a lot of people, and here's the thing, if the only buck you're going to see is a 4-point buck, and you don't have a lot of doe days, and you didn't tag out on doe days or on the doe days, or something happened, and it's late season, you haven't got a deer yet. Sometimes you might have to take that young buck. I'm all for that. Like, if that's something that you need to do to feed your family, I am all for it. But if you have the option, I would urge you to hold off on these younger bucks and give them a chance, and because we want to put southwestern Virginia on the map.
All right. Just to kind of keep us back on task here, Brett, we talked last week after the podcast, and you wanted to talk about training to hunt and a little bit of backpacking and stuff like that.
Yeah, Cam Haines.
So the idea is train to hunt, which is to make sure that your body is in a peak physical condition, in order to be able to get outdoors, hike these hills, and it's safer, and it makes you an ultimate predator, and it's important to be in shape, be healthy, take it serious, treat it like a sport, train to hunt.
That's right, and I'm a big fan of backpacking specifically.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's good just to get out there in the woods. It's fun, but also it's good for training. That level of training over a long distance really gets you in shape. It's good for your heart, right? It's good for your muscles. You're carrying a heavy pack. You're kind of staying out in the woods for days at a time. I spent some time on the AT, a couple weeks.
Which we're going to get into that story in depth on a future podcast. We're about to hit 40 minutes, so we don't want to dive into that this week.
Another day. But I think it's important to get out there and
do it.
Train in different ways. Maybe trail running, backpacking, something.
Yeah, and he says Cam Haines. You guys can Google him and figure out who that is, but he's an absolute monster, and he's essentially a super inspirational guy that hunts the right way, and if everyone did it the way he did it, we would have some absolute monsters out there. We're at the 40-minute mark. I just want to take a little detour, go into the weekly fishing report. So This is going to be super quick, guys. Me and Chris went out this past weekend. It was cold. It was rainy. We went fishing and caught one striper, one small striper all day.
That's it.
One fish. One fish.
It was very difficult out there. I think it's just me though, because I definitely saw some pictures on Facebook of some people absolutely slaying them. So if you know how to catch them right now, you can catch them. But obviously,
We don't know how to catch them.
obviously we don't know how to catch them. But that's okay. That's fishing. Going to go out there probably next week or this coming up weekend, and try to figure them out again. And essentially, I've got to do better at locating fish, and that's pretty much the fishing report this week. We did not have, however, we did just real quick. We spotted a couple new hunting spots.
And some deer.
And some deer. Me and Chris we've never hunted in Tennessee. I don't think, have you hunted in Tennessee before, Chris?
No.
Yeah. So we're new to Tennessee hunting. We've done all our hunting in southwestern Virginia. Basically, that's virtually the only place I've ever hunted. So we're going to branch out this coming hunting season, and we'll take you guys on the journey too. We're going to try to document everything, and everything I've published the bear hunt. The next hunt that's coming out is going to be the muzzleloader hunt where I missed that big buck. So make sure you guys go over to Rippin' Lips TV on YouTube and check that out, or go to look. Make sure you subscribe and look for it on the channel feed. But yeah, essentially, what was my original point? I completely forgot.
Fishing report.
Oh, yeah,
You suck at fishing.
we suck at fishing, whatever. But oh yeah, we scouted out some new areas that we're going to hunt next year in Tennessee. Some public land areas that we're going to take advantage of. Who knows if we're going to get anything? But we're going to get out there next year and give it a try. I know that. You down, Chris?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think
If we can get Brett up here, we'll get him
we need to
involved
get
also.
you need to get up here.
I'll get up here.
Yeah.
Y'all are my turf anyway.
Yeah,
Well, we
that's
are,
true.
yeah.
You're supposed to be teaching us about this land,
Well,
not the other way
yeah.
around.
I know some places to go.
Do you know some public places we can hunt
Yep.
around here?
Oh, yeah.
Oh man, we need to have a convo about that. That's for
Mhm.
sure. We need to get us a Google Earth map out, and you need to start showing me some stuff.
All right. A lot of it's overcrowded.
Yeah, well, that's
Great.
public land
That's-
hunting, and that's
that's the
another
game.
thing. This is going to be. I've never hunted public land. I think it will be pretty cool to kind of document my experience of getting into public land hunting, having to deal with other people in the woods, and not being able to tell them, "Hey, you're on private property. Get out of here." So, it's definitely going to be a new experience. We have all this public land at our disposal. We should definitely be using it. It's ours. We pay for it. We fund it. I think I read the statistic: 95% of conservation comes from hunters and whatnot. And Chris is laughing because this is a broken record with me. But
That was not the same story you were telling on Saturday. You were not saying we have all this public land. You were like, why do we not have more public land? We need more land. I want to hunt the state parks. I want to hunt it all.
yes, which that completely an argument for another time, I guess. But that's essentially, yeah. But we're at 44 minutes and some change. What do we need to end with, Chris? What did we miss?
I did want to talk about, and this is something that maybe you guys can look at before next week. We can go further in depth with this next week, but Mississippi State University, they've got a deer lab, and they've got a web page up. They've got a couple of apps out, some great information on deer habitat, on deer behaviors, rut behaviors. I think there's a Boone and Crockett scoring app.
And that is msudeerlab.com, msudeerlab.com.
Yeah. One of the cool things that they have on the website is a chronological, every 60 days, every 90 days, pictures of deer growing their antlers back.
Mm.
So you can actually see the whole process from start to finish, from the day that they drop their antlers to the peak after they come out of velvet. It's a cool thing to see. I think they manage. Well, I don't remember. I don't want to quote it wrong. Go check it out.
They've got. I'm looking at the website right now, and it looks like they've got some articles on antler development, deer management, habitat management. So I'm definitely going to dive into some of these and see what's going on. It looks like the whole. Actually, those are just photo credits. So I thought all of them were written by the same guy, but it looks like that's just the photo credits. But definitely, and they've also got information on diseases and parasites. So if anybody's worried about potentially getting sick from eating wild game or from deer, you can check on there and kind of see the science behind it.
I think I saw one on there on chronic wasting disease, CWD.
Yeah.
Which
I want to spend a good amount of time talking about that in the future. Maybe dedicate an entire podcast or an entire segment to CWD. And for those of you that don't know what that is, that's chronic waste disease, and I definitely want to dive deep into that subject eventually.
Yeah. But that's all I've got. I just wanted to touch on that. We can talk about it later next week. Maybe each of us will pick out an article or something. But
sweet. So, real quick, to end, cup of the day, coffee cup of the day. What do we got? What are we working with, Chris?
I've got the green Yeti today.
He's got the green
the
Yeti.
Green Yeti.
I'll tell you what, those Yeti mugs or whatever they're called, they're absolutely amazing. They'll keep coffee warm all day.
What are you working with, Richard?
So me and Brett are
here we go.
We're twinning it out today. We got
With the Charbucks.
We got the Starbucks basic white girl cup, and he gets the job done. That's for sure. But anybody got anything else?
Rip lips.
Rip lips. All right, guys. Appreciate you watching. Hope you guys enjoyed. Should be getting these things out on iTunes and things pretty soon. We're figuring that out right now. We're just posting to YouTube, but we're gonna figure out the rest eventually. So stay tuned for updates on social media. Check out the links down below for Chris and Brett's social media. Make sure you go give them a like or a follow and like their stuff. And as always, don't forget to go to @RippinLipsTV. Go to Instagram, follow @RippinLipsTV, and peace.